Beyond the Sunset, A Journey of Hope and Love. Chapter 1, A Chance Meeting. Riverbend was a town that seemed frozen in time, its rhythm marked by the gentle flow of the river and the sounds of familiar faces greeting one another on the streets. People took care of each other in Riverbend, and among them, Daniel was a particularly cherished figure. Daniel had always been known as a man of quiet strength and boundless generosity. Tall and rugged, with lines of both joy and grief etched into his face, he had spent his entire life in this town. He was the kind of person you'd see on a neighbor's porch, fixing a broken railing or bringing groceries to someone too ill to leave their home. His work brought him comfort. Keeping busy helped him avoid the painful memories that tended to flood his mind in stillness. 5 years had passed since the death of his wife, Sara, and although the initial shock and grief had softened, an aching emptiness remained, shadowing his life like an ever-present ghost. Their love had been the kind that transformed two souls, a love that people only dream of, and when Sara fell ill and left him, a part of Daniel felt lost, like a song cut short. He managed to carry on with his life by focusing on helping others, which filled his days, but the quiet hours of evening were still difficult. Alone, he often felt like an actor playing the role of the content neighbor, but inside, he bore an emptiness no one saw. One winter evening, as snow gently blanketed Riverbend in silence, Daniel found himself volunteering at the community center. Every year, the center held a small gathering to bring warmth and light to the long, dark winter months, and Daniel, always eager to lend a hand, was there to set up tables, arrange chairs, and prepare for the night's gathering. While moving tables near the windows, Daniel spotted an elderly woman sitting alone in a corner. She wore a thick gray coat, and her silver hair glistened in the warm glow of the nearby lamp. She was staring outside, lost in thought as she watched the snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. Daniel paused, captivated by the look of serenity mixed with sorrow on her face. The snowfall outside made everything seem softer, quieter, and in that moment, he felt an inexplicable pull to speak to her. Gathering his courage, he walked over, adjusting his scarf as he approached. "Hello, I'm Daniel," he greeted, smiling gently. "It's a beautiful snowfall, isn't it?" The woman turned her gaze from the snow to Daniel, her eyes soft and kind, though slightly surprised. She took a moment, as if awakening from a dream, before smiling back. "Yes, it is," she replied with a slight nod. "I'm Maria. I used to come here often with my husband, long ago." Her voice was soft, the words carrying an unspoken sadness. "But now, it's just me." They exchanged a look of shared understanding, an unspoken acknowledgement of lives that had known both love and loss. Daniel could sense that Maria, like himself, bore the weight of grief. It was a familiar ache, a kind that needed no explanation. They talked for a few moments, a light conversation about their lives. Daniel learned that Maria had been a school teacher in Riverbend for over 30 years, known for her patience and her knack for storytelling. She had loved the joy of teaching, of shaping young minds and watching her students grow. Now, retired and widowed, Maria spent most of her days alone. Her children had moved far away, visiting only occasionally, and her days had become solitary, filled with quiet routines that held little warmth. Her story stirred something within Daniel. Listening to Maria reminded him of Sara, of how she would sit by the window with a cup of tea and talk about her own dreams and hopes, even on her hardest days. As they spoke, he felt a sense of familiarity with Maria, as if they had met before, as if their hearts had known each other in some way that transcended words. Before parting that evening, Daniel felt an impulse to ask her if she would meet him again. "Would you like to have coffee with me tomorrow?" he asked, his voice as gentle as his smile. Maria's eyes sparkled with a warmth that had long been absent. "Yes," she replied, the corners of her lips lifting in a grateful smile. "I'd like that very much, Daniel." The next morning, as the snow continued to fall, Daniel met Maria at the town's small coffee shop, a place that seemed caught in time, with wooden tables and the soft scent of fresh pastries. They sat by the window, watching the snowflakes drift outside as they spoke. Their conversation flowed naturally, with each sharing small pieces of their lives, their joys, and their sorrows. For the first time in years, Daniel felt the weight of his grief ease, just a little, in the presence of someone who understood. Over the coming days and weeks, their friendship blossomed. They spent time together almost every day, walking through the town, sharing meals, and taking slow strolls by the river. Daniel found himself opening up about Sara, sharing memories he had kept hidden in the quiet recesses of his heart. He told Maria about the way Sara loved to garden, her laugh that echoed like music, and her spirit, which had brought light into every corner of their life together. Maria, in turn, shared stories of her husband, a kind man who had adored her, and whom she still missed deeply. She spoke of their travels, of the quiet evenings they'd spent reading together, of the laughter that filled their home when their children were young. Through these memories, she revealed a part of herself that she had hidden away, a part that had grown weary and dormant in the solitude of her life. As winter slowly gave way to the first hints of spring, Daniel and Maria's friendship deepened into a bond that felt almost sacred. They found in each other a solace they hadn't known they needed, a sense of companionship that filled the emptiness they each carried. One afternoon, they walked by the river as the first flowers began to peek through the snow. Maria stopped, gazing at the delicate blossoms, a look of quiet wonder on her face. "It's funny," she said softly, "our life has a way of bringing unexpected beauty, even after everything we've been through." Daniel looked at her, his heart swelling with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. "Yes," he replied, his voice almost a whisper. "It's as if love never really leaves us. It just changes, waits for us to find it again." In the stillness of that moment, standing side by side, they realized that they had found something precious, a connection that went beyond friendship, a companionship born from shared experiences of love, loss, and the quiet courage to keep moving forward. As they walked back to town, their steps slow and steady, they both felt a sense of peace. For the first time in years, they felt truly seen, truly understood. And in that shared understanding, they found the first threads of a new beginning, one that held the promise of hope, the warmth of companionship, and the quiet, unspoken understanding that they would no longer have to face life's challenges alone. What had begun as a chance meeting in a snow-covered town had become a journey that would change both their lives, a journey toward healing and a reminder that even in the autumn of life, love could blossom anew, quietly and beautifully, like the first flowers of spring. Chapter 2: The Bloom of Friendship. As winter's chill faded, Riverbend began to transform, casting off its gray blanket to reveal budding trees and vibrant blooms. The air grew warm and fragrant, and the snow-muffled silence was replaced by birdsong and the gentle hum of new life. It was as if the town itself was waking up, and in that awakening, Daniel and Maria found themselves drawn even closer together. Their morning coffee meetings had become more than a ritual. They had become an anchor in each other's lives, a moment of connection that they each cherished deeply. At the cozy, wooden table by the coffee shop window, Maria would arrive to find Daniel already waiting, a soft smile on his face, his eyes bright with a warmth that had been absent for far too long. They talked for hours each day, so much so that the baristas knew them by name and could predict their orders. On days when the sun felt particularly inviting, they would venture beyond the coffee shop, strolling along the river, where the water sparkled and danced in the sunlight. Together, they discovered old trails that meandered through fields of wildflowers, hidden coves along the river bank, and hills that overlooked the entire valley. And on a particularly beautiful morning, they decided to plant a small garden together. They found a quiet patch of land behind the community center, a neglected area that had long needed a touch of care. With shovels in hand, they turned the earth, laughing as they got dirt on their clothes and joked about whose rows of flowers would bloom first. Maria had once been an avid gardener, and her face lit up with childlike enthusiasm as she showed Daniel how to plant marigolds, roses, and daisies. Her laughter was infectious, filling the quiet space with a warmth that seemed to carry with the breeze. As they worked side by side, Maria opened up to Daniel, sharing stories from her days as a teacher. Her voice was filled with pride and nostalgia as she spoke of the young lives she had touched, the students she had watched grow up, and the endless stacks of essays she had once graded late into the night. Daniel listened intently, mesmerized by her tales, picturing her as the compassionate teacher guiding students with wisdom and patience. Her stories painted a picture of a life dedicated to nurturing others, and he admired her even more for it. When it was Daniel's turn, he found himself speaking of things he hadn't thought about in years. He told Maria about the dreams he and Sara had once held for their future, visions of traveling to faraway places, starting a small woodworking shop, and building a family. He spoke of the way Sara had brought light into his life, how they had dreamed together, planned together, and how her presence still lingered in the quiet corners of his heart. For so long, these memories had felt too painful to revisit, like wounds that hadn't fully healed. But with Maria, sharing them felt like a release, like opening a window and letting fresh air into a long-closed room. As the days turned into weeks, Daniel found himself changing in ways he hadn't anticipated. He realized how much he had closed himself off since Sara's death, how he had built walls around his heart, isolating himself from the pain, and from the possibility of joy. He had focused solely on helping others, pouring his energy into his community as a way to escape his own loneliness. But with Maria, he felt a crack in those walls, a quiet shift that allowed laughter and light to seep through. Her companionship brought him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years, and he began to rediscover the simple joys of connection, laughter, and shared understanding. Maria, too, was changing in ways she hadn't imagined. She had spent years feeling like her life was a memory, like the best days were behind her and all she had left was a routine existence. She had convinced herself that love, companionship, and connection were remnants of her past, things that could no longer be reclaimed. But with Daniel, she began to feel alive again. His gentle nature and thoughtful presence reminded her that she was still vibrant, still capable of deep emotions, and still deserving of friendship and warmth. Her laughter returned, her eyes brightened, and for the first time in a long while, she began to look forward to each new day. One warm afternoon, as they sat on a bench overlooking the river, Maria turned to Daniel, her eyes thoughtful, her voice soft. "You know, Daniel, I had convinced myself that life was just a waiting game now. That I was just here, passing time until it was my turn to go. But being here, with you, I see now that there's still so much to look forward to, so much to give and receive. Daniel met her gaze, his own eyes glistening. I feel the same way, Maria. I thought I'd never open my heart again, not after Sara. I thought love was something that had ended for me, that I was done feeling this kind of connection. He paused, searching for the right words. But it turns out that love doesn't end, not really. It changes, maybe, but it's always there, waiting for us to find it again. The air between them was filled with unspoken understanding, a sense of shared healing that neither had expected. They sat together in silence, watching the river flow, each lost in thoughts of past loves and new beginnings. Their hands rested on the bench between them, and without thinking, Daniel's fingers brushed against Maria's. She looked down, startled, then smiled, allowing her hand to remain close to his. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but to both of them, it felt like a leap, an acknowledgement of the comfort they had found in each other. As spring blossomed fully around them, their friendship continued to grow, filling the spaces in their lives that had once felt empty. They became a familiar sight around Riverbend, two friends laughing, planting, and sharing meals together. People noticed the change in them, the way Daniel's laughter came more easily and the way Maria's face glowed with renewed vitality. It was as if the entire town sensed the quiet, beautiful bond that had formed between them, and it filled everyone who knew them with a sense of hope. In their shared moments, Daniel and Maria found not only companionship, but a profound sense of purpose. Together, they began volunteering at the community center, organizing small events and helping those in need. They hosted garden workshops, inviting children to plant flowers and learn about nature, and they organized a reading corner at the library, where Maria would read aloud to children and Daniel would help with crafts and projects. Through these acts of service, they found a deeper connection to each other and a renewed sense of joy in giving. One day, while preparing the garden for a summer gathering, Maria looked at Daniel, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, Daniel. You've given me a reason to look forward to each day, to feel alive again." Daniel reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "And you've done the same for me, Maria. More than you'll ever know." Their friendship had indeed bloomed, rooted in shared sorrow, but blossoming in newfound joy. They had each taken tentative steps out of the shadows of their past, stepping into a light that warmed them both. As they sat together under the clear blue sky, surrounded by the garden they had created, Daniel and Maria felt a sense of peace they hadn't known in years, a peace that came from knowing they were no longer alone, that they had each other, and that the days ahead held beauty, purpose, and the promise of something more. Chapter 3: Love Rekindled. As spring turned to summer, the town of Riverbend bloomed in full splendor, echoing the quiet transformation in Daniel and Maria's hearts. The wildflowers were bright along the riverbanks, the air was filled with birdsong, and even the people in town seemed to move with a renewed energy. But it was Daniel and Maria's bond that most visibly mirrored the changing season. Their friendship, rooted in shared grief and companionship, had deepened into something undeniably profound, a love as gentle as it was strong, growing quietly, almost as if it had always been there, just waiting to be recognized. Days passed in a joyful blur. They shared nearly every waking moment together, cooking meals, visiting friends, tending their garden, and taking long, leisurely walks through town. Their favorite spot was a quiet hill that overlooked the river, Sitting side by side on a weathered bench, they would watch the water flow below them, their conversations as steady and comfortable as the river's current. There was a peace in their togetherness, a feeling of having found exactly what they had both needed, even if they hadn't known they were searching for it. Friends and neighbors noticed the change. Smiles and knowing glances followed them everywhere. Townsfolk would see them strolling hand in hand or sitting close together at the cafe, sharing a quiet laugh, and they would whisper about how love had found them both again. "It's never too late," some would say. Others, seeing Daniel's joyful demeanor and Maria's glowing warmth, simply smiled, feeling their own hearts lifted by the sight of such unexpected happiness. One warm evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the fields, Daniel and Maria sat on the porch of Daniel's small house. The air was still, and the scent of blooming jasmine drifted around them, sweet and heady. Daniel looked at Maria, and a wave of gratitude filled him. He felt as if he had been given a second chance, a chance to feel connected, alive, and hopeful again. Yet, as he gazed at her, he couldn't help but think of Sara, his late wife, the woman with whom he had once shared a similar happiness. He hadn't spoken of her much with Maria, he had shared stories of their life together, but the pain had always kept him from diving too deeply into his memories. But tonight, something felt different. There was no more pain in the memory, only a soft, almost bittersweet warmth. "Maria," he began, his voice steady yet tender, "I want you to know that a part of me was scared to let myself feel this way again. I loved Sara deeply, and losing her felt like a part of me had been torn away." He paused, his gaze distant as he recalled those difficult years. "But being with you, I've realized that love doesn't end with loss. It doesn't diminish. If anything, it grows deeper. I think, somehow, my love for you honors my love for her." Maria's eyes softened, and she reached out to hold his hand, her fingers warm and reassuring against his. "Daniel, I know. I know because I felt it too." She paused, searching for the words to express the emotions that had been building within her heart. "Losing my husband left a void I thought could never be filled. I convinced myself that love was a thing of the past, a memory I would cherish but never relive." She smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "And then you came into my life. You showed me that it's never too late to love again, that there's still so much life left to live." As they held hands, the setting sun cast its final rays across the sky, painting it with shades of pink, orange, and deep violet. They watched in silence, each lost in thought, both marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. They were older now, their lives marked by experience, loss, and growth. But age had not dulled their capacity to feel, rather, it had deepened their understanding of what it meant to truly cherish another person. In the days that followed, their love grew stronger, more certain. Daniel found himself waking up each morning with a sense of anticipation, a quiet joy that he hadn't felt in years. The smallest moments, Maria's laughter, the way she tilted her head when she listened, her gentle touch as they walked hand in hand, filled his heart with a warmth that made each day feel new and full of possibility. Maria, too, felt a shift within her. Her heart, once weighed down by loss and loneliness, now felt light, like it was ready to soar. She had spent years believing that her story had already been written, that she was simply living out the last chapter. But with Daniel, she felt as if she were beginning a new story, one filled with laughter, companionship, and hope. She cherished the way he looked at her, the thoughtful gestures, the way he listened to her stories, always with a gentle smile that made her feel seen and valued. One afternoon, as they worked side by side in their garden, Maria felt an overwhelming urge to express her gratitude. She looked up at Daniel, her hand still buried in the soil, and said, "You've given me something precious, Daniel. You've given me a reason to look forward to each day, a reminder that life is full of beauty, even after loss." Daniel looked back at her, his own heart swelling with affection. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "And you've given me a second chance at happiness, Maria. I never thought I could feel this way again, that I could laugh and love with this much depth. You've brought color back into my life." As the weeks passed, they made small, meaningful commitments to each other, creating a shared life in ways both big and small. They began hosting Sunday dinners for friends and neighbors, their laughter filling the house and spilling out into the warm evening air. Together, they cooked, gardened, and even took small trips to the nearby mountains, where they would hike, marveling at the world around them, feeling like they were seeing it anew through each other's eyes. In their quiet moments, they would talk about their pasts, honoring the memories of those they had loved and lost. And through these conversations, they came to understand that love is not confined to a single chapter in one's life. It can find us again and again, even after heartbreak, even after we've convinced ourselves that it's too late. They realized that love, like a river, flows endlessly, sometimes through unexpected paths, but always carrying with it the hope of renewal. On a warm evening at the end of summer, they returned to their favorite bench by the river, watching the sunset cast golden reflections on the water. They sat in a comfortable silence, both feeling the weight and beauty of the journey they had traveled together. The colors in the sky seemed to mirror the love they had found, rich, layered, and filled with a depth only they could truly understand. As the last light faded from the sky, Daniel turned to Maria, a question in his eyes. "Would you do me the honor of sharing the rest of this journey with me, Maria?" His voice was barely above a whisper, yet it held a world of meaning. Maria's heart swelled with joy, her eyes filling with tears. She nodded, unable to find the words, but her hand found his, her fingers entwining with his own in a silent answer. And in that moment, under the vast expanse of the evening sky, they sealed their promise to each other, a promise not only of love, but of hope, companionship, and the quiet assurance that they had found in each other a home, a safe harbor where they could both finally rest, dream, and grow. Their love had been rekindled not in the fire of youthful passion, but in the steady warmth of understanding, shared memories, and the quiet joy of having found each other in the most unexpected of seasons. They knew there would be days of laughter, days of challenges, and perhaps even days of sorrow ahead. But they also knew that, together, they had the strength to face whatever life might bring, and that love, true, abiding love, was a journey that would carry them beyond the sunsets and into the dawn of each new day. Chapter 4: A Legacy of Hope. Years flowed gently by, and Daniel and Maria became the heart and soul of Riverbend. Their lives intertwined so seamlessly that people could hardly recall a time when they weren't together. They were known in town not just for the quiet affection they shared, but for their unwavering kindness, their openness, and the strength they exuded as a couple who had faced loss yet found profound joy together. They were the embodiment of hope and resilience, and their presence left a lasting impression on everyone they met. People of all ages would come to them, drawn to the warmth of their story, seeking advice or simply the comfort of their presence. Young couples admired their patience and commitment, marveling at how the bond between them only seemed to deepen with time. Those who had experienced heartbreak and loss found a renewed sense of hope in Daniel and Maria's journey, feeling that perhaps love could still find them, too. And the elderly, who had once resigned themselves to the notion that their best days were behind them, saw in Daniel and Maria a beautiful reminder that life could still hold wonder, growth, and connection. Their story spread beyond Riverbend. News of their remarkable love reached neighboring towns, and people began to write letters to them, sharing their own tales of love, loss, and second chances. Each letter was a testament to the hope Daniel and Maria's story had inspired. Some were stories of rekindled marriages, others were messages of healing from those still carrying the weight of grief. These letters became a cherished part of Daniel and Maria's life, a tangible reminder that their love had become something far greater than themselves. One day, as the stack of letters grew, Daniel and Maria decided to start writing back to those who had reached out, sending words of encouragement to people they had never met but felt a deep connection with. They spent many evenings side by side at the kitchen table, each composing letters filled with the wisdom they had gained through years of love, loss, and renewal. Their words were simple but heartfelt, a message they hoped would resonate with others. Love is not confined to any age, nor does it vanish with loss. It endures, transforms, and finds us when we open our hearts to it again. Each letter felt like a small act of kindness sent out into the world, like seeds scattered in the hope that they would blossom into something beautiful for those who received them. Sometimes, people would write back, sharing how Daniel and Maria's words had touched them, how they felt less alone or more courageous in their journey. And in those moments, Daniel and Maria felt their own love deepen, knowing that their story was now a part of something larger, a beacon for others navigating their own seasons of life. One crisp autumn day, as the leaves turned gold and amber and the air grew sharp with the scent of fallen leaves, Daniel and Maria took a walk by the river, hand in hand. The landscape was a riot of color, the river a serene mirror of the vibrant trees. They sat on their favorite bench overlooking the water, a place where they had shared countless sunsets, laughter, and quiet moments. As they watched the golden leaves drifting down, Maria placed her hand gently over Daniel's, her face glowing with gratitude. "Thank you, Daniel," she said softly, her voice laced with emotion, "for showing me that love doesn't end. It lives on, even after all the sorrow. It's as if every joy, every memory of those we've loved and lost, lives on in us." Daniel looked into her eyes, his own heart full. He reached up, brushing a stray hair from her cheek, his hand lingering for a moment in a gentle caress. "And thank you, Maria," he replied, his voice thick with feeling, "for reminding me that love isn't bound by age or circumstance. It's limitless, and it's always worth cherishing, no matter where we find ourselves in life." As they sat there in the fading light, a quiet peace settled between them. They had found each other late in life, and together, they had created a love that felt timeless. They had no illusions that life would go on forever, but they knew with absolute certainty that the love they had shared would carry on, woven into the very fabric of their town, in the lives of those they had touched, and in the hearts of everyone who had been moved by their story. In the years that followed, their lives continued to intertwine with those around them in profound ways. They started organizing community events, bringing people together for gatherings by the river or small festivals celebrating the changing seasons. Daniel and Maria found joy in these simple acts of connection, always looking for ways to bring hope and joy to others. They became mentors to young couples, guiding them through challenges and offering them the quiet assurance that love, true and resilient, could weather any storm. For families, they became almost like a second set of grandparents, always ready with a warm embrace, a listening ear, and stories from their own lives to remind others that life's trials were temporary, but love was enduring. As the seasons continued to turn, Daniel and Maria grew older, their movements slower, their hair now fully grey. But the light in their eyes remained as bright as ever, and the love they shared was as steady as the river that flowed through their town. Even as time etched new lines upon their faces, it also deepened the love between them, a love that seemed to hold all the beauty and wisdom they had gathered throughout their lives. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching another sunset, Daniel turned to Maria, a soft smile playing on his lips. "Do you ever think about the legacy we'll leave behind?" he asked, his voice gentle. Maria leaned her head on his shoulder, her fingers lacing through his. "Yes," she replied thoughtfully. "But I don't think of it in terms of anything grand. I think it's in the small things, the kindness we've shown, the love we've shared, the hope we've given others. I think our legacy is already out there, in the hearts of everyone we've touched." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words. They had lived fully, and through their story, they had inspired others to believe in love again, to seek connection, and to hold on to hope even when the world felt dark. Their legacy was not in material things, but in the lives they had enriched, in the seeds of love and resilience they had planted within others. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting its final golden glow across the town they held dear, Daniel and Maria shared a peaceful silence, feeling the weight of their journey together. They knew that their story had become a part of something larger, something timeless and enduring. It was a legacy that would live on, carried by those who had been touched by their kindness, their courage, and their unwavering belief in the power of love. In the days that followed, Daniel and Maria continued to live quietly, surrounded by friends, family, and a community that loved them deeply. And as they grew even older, they found peace in knowing that their love had transcended their own lives, becoming a beacon for all who heard their story, a story of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable strength of love that carries on, far beyond the last sunset, woven into the very fabric of Riverbend and the hearts of those who cherished them. The end.